today for our learner lunch because we have Professor Luke Wolfenden joining us. Now, Luke, many of you may know, but if you don't, he is an NHMRC investigator holder. He is a professor at the University of Newcastle and an international leader in implementation and behavioural science. Luke has kind of built his career around the use of evidence in public health to improve decision making and ensure that evidence-based policies are implemented. Now, one thing that you might know, or you might know about Luke, is that I think he's actually been able to crack every scheme within the NHMRC, am I right?
Right.
So we thought, who better to ask us to come along and try and help us in terms of enhancing our opportunities for success with the upcoming NHMRC investigator round. But we're also looking at potentially applying for a synergy grant next year. So there may be questions at the end around that as well. So I'm delighted that Luke could join us today, and there's quite a few of us that are preparing applications, either for the next round, and if not the next round, in years to come. So we're all hoping to glean some insights into how we can crack that, 7, 8, 9%. So thanks, Luke, over to you. We do have lunch because it's a learnt lunch. Yeah. What do we do? Because it's hot. Do we want to whip around, get a plate and sit down before? Sorry, Luke, if you had come, you would have got it.
Yeah. That sounds good to me.
Let's quickly do that so that the food doesn't go cold, and then we'll get started. Lunch was late. I went to the hospital instead of coming here. And normally we have our lunch on the table, so it's ready. Yeah. Right, so that was on Friday that's from the yes, yeah, I saw I did say a level for it. Okay. I know it might not have helped it, but thank you. Sort of about it. I just got a little more down. Oh, yeah. We took the wrong direction, so yeah. I didn't.
You are so on it. Experience.
We're working on that. Move things around without
I tried to already.
well, there was
some stuff. Oh, thank you. I'm really yeah. There is two. No, she does.
Hi. All right, should we, there's people still in line, but I just wonder if we at least get Luke to start with introducing what he's talking about. Over to you, Luke.
All right, I'll make a start. Well, thanks first for the invitation to present today. I certainly don't have a formula, but I can certainly I'm certainly happy to share and always discuss you know, the approach that I took in the hope that it's of some benefit to those of you who are considering applying for an investigator grant. I'd also just like to start by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land that we're on, the Wabikal people, and paying my respects to elders past, present and emerging. I do have a couple of slides, but I thought I would keep this relatively informal. I've got a copy of my application up as well, so I'm kind of happy to kind of take, for things to be a bit more fluid and take questions and show you, you know, how I approach things, if that's at all helpful. But
Luke, sorry, but just for context, you've now received 2 investigator grants, yeah?
yes, that's right.
And your second one just in the most recent ones.
That's right. Yep,
Yeah.
yep, both at the leadership level. Yeah, so maybe it's worth saying or acknowledging that, you know, if you're applying or considering applying for an investigator grant, good on you, and good luck to you. These are incredibly difficult schemes to crack. Yeah, I've been lucky enough to be on NHMRC fellowship since 2012, and so I felt like I had a good sense of how the scheme worked. And for a while there, before it switched over to the investigator grant scheme, renewal of funding was far more likely than discontinuation of funding. And awards were, in some sense, seen as a bit of a career path. I think that's certainly not the case anymore, and you know, many of the people that have been on fellowships move off fellowships, particularly with this investigator scheme. It's also, I think, attracted a lot of, because of the project funding attached to this award, it's attracted a lot of people who may have ongoing appointments with the university and aren't on soft money into the scheme. And that, I think, is relieving universities to some extent of funding research, so, and making the whole scheme far more competitive, particularly for those who might not have an ongoing appointment. So, yeah, good on you for having a go. Perhaps just my first comments when you're thinking about applying is, you know, make sure that you're as prepared as you can be for the application, starting with appraising your competitiveness. You've probably got some sense of how competitive you are to your peers. You also need to have a look to see how competitive you might be relative to people who are funded in the same category that you're thinking of applying for. Take the time that you need to prepare your application. Like I threw everything at this application. I think I might have had like 8 weeks where I was pretty much off my main work, and I was just focusing on developing up this application. And I'd probably thought about the sorts of things that I might write in the application 12 months before. So, and I must have gone through 30 like iterations. So the nature of my application changed considerably over those few months. I'd recommend that you speak to others who have been successful in past grant schemes. If they're comfortable enough to share their applications with you, they will. I certainly spoke to people from other institutions who were successful, and their input was incredibly valuable in how I shaped my application. So, you know, kind of really get as much input as you can, not into not just the decision about whether it's a good time for you to run or not, but making sure you've got enough time that you present the best possible version of the application that you can muster. Because I think unless you know, everyone has relatively slim chance of success in this scheme, and you've got probably next to no chance unless you don't put your best foot forward and present like a a strong of an application as possible. And that means that there are large opportunity costs with submitting these applications, and you really need to, I guess, like time your run. I think the only benefit of submitting when you think you're underprepared is that at least you've got something to put into other fellowship schemes, and at least you'll know then what it is that's required if you haven't applied before to submit to this scheme. So I think there is some benefit of submitting an application, but there are also kind of considerable opportunity costs. So kind of keep that in mind. The other comment I'd make is that it's really hard to do this as a lone researcher, and it's really important then to be part of a strong research environment, like Centres for Research Excellence, which I know the group has, also, of course, the HMRI group. And that's because a lot of the criteria relate to the sorts of things that those centres of excellence and that sort of infrastructure are needed to provide you as a group, and in order for your work to be undertaken kind of with successfully and feasibly and with high impact. And that has kind of meant that for those of us who lead groups, you really need to make sure that you're providing an environment that makes it possible for your early career and mid-career researchers, as well as yourself, to submit applications that are going to be competitive because you've created a really supportive environment. And so a lot of my time over the past couple of years has been on developing strategic partnerships, because, for example, we need to demonstrate the impact of our work on health policy and practice. And so in New South Wales, for example, there's only one Ministry of Health, there's only one Centre for Population Health. If I want government to use my research findings, then I have to be a partner and a trusted partner with that agency. And there are hundreds of public health researchers out there, and in principle, they're probably all vying for the attention of that single partner. So strategic partners, particularly government partners, are a bit of a gate towards research impact. My experience in working with strategic partners like government agencies they can only manage a relatively small number of academic partners. And so if you're not in the group, you're out of the group, very hard to get in. And so it's hard to understate the importance of time spent forming strategic partnerships so that you can approach them to be on your grant, so that they know the research that you're undertaking, and so that they apply your research findings to the decisions that they make. Together with those partnerships that you need for impact, you also need good partnerships and research infrastructure to undertake like leading research or scientific endeavours. And so, we've also thought about what professional associations, societies, or other groups do we need to form or be involved in order to demonstrate the scientific credentials of our research group. And so for us in population health and for our group, we have sought leadership responsibilities in international implementation science organisations. We've been successful in attracting funding and leading Cochrane Public Health, which undertakes evidence synthesis and provides an opportunity for us to participate in decision-making processes of international agencies like WHO. And these sorts of kind of assets benefit everyone. Everyone in your group that's looking to apply can use these assets to demonstrate, to access opportunities for leadership, for impact, to demonstrate esteem. And so creating an environment for your researchers that allows them to kind of tap into, exhibit and demonstrate impacts consistent with the investigator criteria is really, really important. Very, very hard to win these grants, I think, without that research environment that's highly conducive to the work that you're doing and your involvement or leadership in those sorts of entities. And I guess the third thing I wanted to raise is that you kind of need, as well as the research environment and being prepared, you kind of need a personal strategy for applying for these schemes. That you kind of need to know, well, what the criteria is, and start to think about how you can kind of take responsibility for your own track record to bring that up to speed where you're in a position that you think you might be competitive. So, you know, we all have too many papers to write, but there are some papers that are likely to be far greater impact than others. And if you're anything like me, you just find it really hard to get any papers out. But for some reason, even your high impact papers, sometimes I move to the bottom of the queue just because they're a bit harder to write. They also require patience. So if you're wanting a high impact paper, it needs to go in a high impact journal. And so you need to make sure that you're kind of patient enough that you shop around your paper and give it every chance of getting in a journal that is going to ensure that the work is cited well. We engaged a consultant to support the kind of editing and reviewing of our investigator grants. That was something that we accessed, one that was provided through the school, but we also engaged and paid for one ourselves. And so they served all applications that went in through our group, and they were good at providing kind of little tips and tricks to demonstrate impact, or metrics that can be used in your impact statement, or when you're demonstrating the impact of your research publications. So I found that, like, I learned a few things out of that process and found that quite useful. These consultants, at least the consultant that we engaged, I'm happy to share the details, like they are working with every institution, like they're working with Monash, all group of 8 universities. And so they see all applications going through, and they know what a winning application looks like. And so if you're not, that puts universities or institutions that can afford that sort of service at an advantage. And so we kind of saw that as being to our disadvantage and thought we need to pay for this service ourselves. So that's something that we did. The other thing in terms of prioritising, having a personal strategy is demonstrating the impact of your work, and particularly your top 10 publications, but also, of course, your impact case study. So in our line of work, or my line of research, the main impact that we would look to demonstrate is health impacts. And so that meant that we would work to ensure that when we're working with policy agencies, that policy agencies like government health departments were citing our work in the documents that we were developing together, or the programs that they were disseminating, or the policy documents that were distributed. And unless you are assertive in that process, it typically gets unrecognised. You could be partnering with them for a decade and your name is nowhere to be found in any of the initiatives that you might have been working on them with. And so it's important that when you're working with those partnering agencies that could demonstrate your impact, that's clear to everyone that relationship is reciprocal. You're often giving up your time to provide expertise and input to a policymaker. And the understanding then is that any expertise or advice or research that you might provide as part of the development of policy process is kind of acknowledged somewhere. So we kind of then, I think, have achieved a culture where, at least with some partners, that is kind of quite clear and well understood. If it's not there, it can be very hard to kind of fit in retrospectively. And the other thing that we will do is invest in papers that demonstrate our impact where there is not a better source to demonstrate impact. So one example I'll show you in a moment is we did a lot of work in child obesity prevention for over a decade. That informed like a $70 million investment by the New South Wales government that was based precisely on the work that we'd undertaken. but nowhere was that citable. Like, we couldn't find any reference to our involvement and the fact that it was based on our work. And so we wrote up a commentary paper with our policy partners where they made that link explicit, and they made comment about the value of our work. And I would pull out comments and quotes from that paper to insert in my application to demonstrate benefit, because it's the words of the policy agencies, and we found that very powerful. The other thing that we would do and are doing is we would invest in modelling to demonstrate the impact of our work, particularly our health impact. So if we've had a program that we've developed, adopted by New South Wales or other states, in your impact statement, you're left with a statement which says, we developed this program, the Ministry of Health funded it, and it's now in, at 500 schools in South Australia. And that's okay, but it's not that compelling. You want to take that one step further and say, well, 500 schools means an improvement in healthy eating or physical activity or reductions in BMI of this magnitude, which would produce this much benefit in terms of costs to the health system, or in terms of health outcomes for the community or the public. So we would invest in strategic publications to demonstrate benefit of our work. And we've actually just bought some of that expertise in-house, which has been really useful.
What do you mean by that? Sorry, Luke.
Oh, so we're in the past, we probably would have had to contract it out to consultants to undertake modelling work for us, or health economists. So we're kind of now looking to kind of employ health economists.
Health economists in the group. In
the group, yeah. So we can do it as part of our work rather than external. So would it be helpful now if I just went through a couple of slides?
Yeah, sure. I think so far that's been really helpful and depressing.
It's all depressing. So this will be familiar to anyone applying. So this is the, I'm just taking this from an old presentation. There we go. This is the criteria for the investigator grant scheme. I'll just go through each of the criteria now and just tell you a little bit about how I approached it. So this is the research. This is the research impact section. And this is where you need to write your research case study. And this is the thing I probably changed the most out of all my application. I still find this the hardest thing to write. But there are three components to this. The first is, hold on a sec, research impact, yep. I think I've got the wrong, oh no, this is right. The first is yes. So the first is that you need to demonstrate the impact that your research has had. And we will typically focus on these two impacts, knowledge or health. And I would say most of the time, well, I focus just on health, but that is also the case for most of the applications that come out of our group. I think it can be a bit of a trap. Although you are able to demonstrate impacts across a number, I think there's also a societal impact. You can demonstrate impact across a number of domains. I think that increases the burden of evidence that you need to provide in this impact case study. And so I think we would typically nominate health, but sometimes we would, I would use kind of metrics to link a paper, for example. Like I might mention that the paper was published in the BMJ or something, despite the fact that it's attributing to I'm trying to demonstrate a health outcome. So when you're looking at the track record of the criteria, just kind of stick to scores of 7, really. Like, don't bother about looking below that list, because that's kind of what you should shoot for, even if you fall a little bit short. Unless you're kind of scoring 6s, you'll be unlikely to be successful. So kind of keep your eyes high in this criteria. But for health, you're really looking for changing the development, a paradigm changing development that has improved health and health systems, services, policy programs, and clinical practice that has significant impact on health with an extensive reach, or had a profound impact on health with a modest reach, or profoundly improved the health of Australia's Indigenous people, or led to significant, scalable, sustainable changes in health systems and services to large numbers of communities. So I would typically pick one or two of these examples, and I would use the words that this track record statement criteria has when I'm describing the impact that I had. You then need to demonstrate that that the research actually contributed to that impact. So you kind of have to say, well, this is what the impact was, this is how the research contributed to the impact, and this was my contribution to that research. And disentangling that, I think, is the difficult part. And I think for this, there was a change between the last scheme and the 2024 round, which I was awarded in, where I think they no longer had 3 different sections where you could write this. I think you could just write it in an extended, in a single form. But I decided to continue on with the structure that was awarded, that it had been for the past 5 years, because I had assumed that the people reviewing the applications might still expect it to look like that. When we engaged as a consultant, they had recommended that we flip the presentation of this case study so it's more intuitive. So kind of start by saying, this is me and this is the research I do and this is the impact that research has had. So it's kind of like flipped. But I went against that. I just thought, I think sticking to what people know, particularly on the year that this has changed, might be a more sensible approach. And I'm not sure whether that's advice I'd kind of continue to give, particularly as the scheme continues to roll out with where there's not those restrictions on having 3 separate boxes for each of these 3 different impacts. Oh, that's just a demonstration of the paper that I wrote to demonstrate the impact that our work had on child obesity prevention that I mentioned earlier. And all these people are policymakers. Track records. This is where you need to include your top 10. A couple of quick comments on track record statement. I haven't been a reviewer for the investigator grant scheme, so maybe if anyone in there had been a reviewer, they might be able to contradict this. But at least when I was talking to people, the things that were important to consider and that I certainly took seriously were, obviously you really only want to be presenting here papers where you might be first or last author or middle author paper on something which is really big. You need to make sure that your work isn't dominated by systematic reviews, like 1 or 2 seems to be fine. And there's always a tendency to want to put these in because they're often cited more and have a greater field-weighted citation impact. But you want to demonstrate your expertise in primary research as well as evidence synthesis. I had one person say to me that they didn't think you should put in any systematic reviews because systematic reviews, particularly with AI, where they'll soon be automatically generated, they're not really a scientific endeavor. They're not generating new knowledge, and so I think that's debatable. And I kind of ignored that, and I think I included 2 systematic reviews in my suite of 10. And so the things, I can show you my application, but
can we jump in on you?
Yeah, please.
So in terms of the publications, the college have actually sent around a paper to those that are applying that indicate I guess, some benchmark of the successful applications from previous years and things like that, and what you're what's expected in order for those successful applications. So I went through that, and when it got to the publications, it actually said, you know, at a minimum, you'd want a field weighted citation impact of 3. So when you I think you said you were about to go to your publication. So I was just interested, did you follow that rule in terms of making sure they were all greater than 3, or?
I would say field weighted citation index is probably the metric that I focused most on. So that was like really important to me. And what was weird is that sometimes that was like you may have 2 papers that you think are in the same field, and one would have been cited half as less as the other, but the field weighted they were around, you know, it wasn't intuitive. And so that did mean that I was selecting papers with higher field weighted citation index. That actually dictated a lot. And I think I might have had, I mean, I can tell you when I go, I think there may have been like 2.5 or 2.7 field weighted citation index for one of the papers, but I think the rest of mine would have been above, I think.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, 3, you know, 3s, 4s, 5s. I have a couple of really high ones, but yeah. But in the end, you can kind of only go with what you got, can't you? But
Vanessa, there's just a couple of things on the chat from Kathy. Would you be on
Yeah.
do you want me to look at the chat? Shall I stop sharing?
If you can,
Right corner.
sorry, what am I doing now?
It's not in the screen.
I don't have to do.
Sorry, I ain't working.
It's getting harder to get advice from past successful investigative grants, given the increase in the competition for funding. Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know if they can go. I don't know, Luke, do you want to address that?
I mean, it may be that you just kind of need personal relationships with them. At the university houses past successful investigator grant apps, and so I went and looked at all of those before I applied. So, you know, Claire Collins is there, my old one is there, Nicole's and Rachel's are there. You know, so there are plenty that are on file that you can go and have a look at, and I think I can't think of anyone that I approached that didn't speak to me, whether they're giving me the right advice or not, but didn't speak to me about and weren't what I perceived as helpful. But I guess you appreciate that, you know, it is highly competitive, and they've probably got people going in their scheme. They've got people within their group are going in for the award as well. So maybe that coyness is understandable, but I think everyone at our institution that I approached was happy to speak to me. And yeah. What's the appetite for translational research, and do you think there is balance in the current competitive market for translation at the coalface of patient care? Kathy, do you want to just explain that a bit more?
Hi. So what I'm hearing is this is some really high level investigator grants. And I see that the one you presented was around child obesity, which is awesome. Do you think that the grants that are being accepted reflect and are being translational to the patient care population at the moment? Or are they more high level?
So I think, are you asking about discovery sites versus clinical science?
Yeah.
And implementation science.
Yes, obviously I'm just more familiar with the work that gets funded in my field. I mean, I think as long as the work is meeting the criteria, and the bar is really high for everyone, but, you know, you're looking at paradigm shifting discoveries, and, you know, that's really hard. Like, who has a paradigm shifting discovery? Or at least you need to make the case that that you might have, or that you could have, based on the work that you're doing, or may have done. So I'm not sure if I can answer that, but I think I will. I think there's a tendency to look, like, to keep your eyes down on the work that you're doing and look at its impact at the level that that work is occurring. So that's often in your clinic or your hospital or your, you know, in the schools in your region that you're intervening with. And I think it's very hard to get a grant like this with impacts that are localized, you know, regional. They need to be at a much larger scale than that. That's kind of implicit in the criteria, but also means that when you're thinking of demonstrating impact or strategies that you might use to translate your research, then you need to think about how it can be adopted or cited by guidelines, for example. So clinical practice guidelines is a good example of how you can get international recognition and demonstration of impact for your work. But we have like a list of organizations that that we think would find our work useful, and when we undertake research where that's the case, we'll kind of send it straight to them or organise to meet to talk about it with them. And so, particularly if we know what it is that they're doing, and so that can sometimes support its use and translation at a scale outside where the work was conducted. I hope that answers your question, Kathy.
I guess another thing that sort of come up was for me, and I'm such a novice, so apologies if it's a bit of a silly thing. It sounds a little bit like Robin Hood and just the rich getting richer, and it's harder for, like, I guess maybe some of the people in the room today to actually ever get the ability to have a bite of that apple. And if so, like, how do you actually change that? Because that's just people in power making those decisions that may not reflect what is actually needed for patient care. That's a bit concerning.
This all private, Kathy.
So was there
Yeah.
another comment?
Sorry, I
was
think
there-
that's, sorry, Luke.
Oh, I thought there might have been another comment in the room.
That was mine. This is off track, Kathy.
Can I ask a specific question about the top 10 publications? Sorry, Luke, I'm not sure if you had more to say about the top 10 publications. One of my questions is, did you order them in a specific way, like from best to worst or chronological, or did it tell a story by the order that you put them in?
I didn't tell a story, but I did order them not in order of impact. I put my best papers first and last, and I kind of hid some of the other ones in between.
That's strategic.
Very helpful, thank you. And what about papers that are newer? They often don't have high citations yet, but you think that perhaps they're a big discovery or whatever. Do you still include those, or do you think if they just don't have the metrics yet, they're just not for that list?
I didn't include any that didn't have a field weighted citation index. So I think that takes about a year. Yeah, so I didn't include any. I think if I published a big paper in a big journal, I would. But if it's not, if people aren't going to look at it and go, that's a big paper, yeah, I probably wouldn't.
Yeah, thanks.
Did you want me to talk about leadership? Is there other questions? Okay, what's the time? I won't pull up the slides again. I'll just kind of speak to them. So I just think leadership is probably the thing that is most within your control. So publications, it's really hard to get work in tier 1 medical journals and all that kind of stuff. But I think it is easier than those other criteria to generate a high leadership score, particularly if you're in a rich research environment, because there's kind of opportunities abound, and it's just about being assertive in looking for and taking on opportunities. So for leadership, relative to opportunity, you need to have expertise in supervision, mentoring and training beyond your research group. So, kind of everyone will cite, I've got this many students and, I mentor a few, postdoc researchers or so on. I think what you're wanting to demonstrate here is that you kind of initiated as part of your CRE, for example, a supervision, mentoring, or training program, that you are a mentor in kind of international training schemes. So in my field, Health Promotion Association, Public Health Association, Cochrane all have mentored training programs or mentoring initiatives. And I think with all this leadership stuff, it's like start at international if you can and kind of work back, because everyone else will start local and work up. It's the same with peer review of publications and grants. Like you would never say no to a high impact peer review that comes across your desk, because you've got room in this application for a very small statement like, I review papers and grants annually, a review for leading schemes and journals in the past 5 years, and you just want to cite a couple of the high impact journals that you reviewed for. And international funding schemes like NIH, NRC, they're always looking for external peer reviewers. Like if you reach out and contact them, I guarantee that you'll be sent a grant application to review if they have one that's in your field of expertise. Similarly, government bodies, advisory boards, perhaps not government advisory boards, but professional societies, in my experience at least, are calling out for people to help run them and to lead them. And they often have awards that are associated with them that are undersubscribed. A couple of professional associations I'm in, we put out a call for award applications and we might get half a dozen if we're lucky. And they provide great opportunities for international networking. Often organisations like WHO will approach professional societies to pull on individuals with expertise aligned to that professional societies onto guideline development groups. And so the pathway to leadership and kind of impact in that section is through professional societies. And my experience is it's not too difficult to find societies to have a leadership role in if you're willing to put in the time. This track record statement also, it's not just about listing your leadership kind of credentials in terms of metrics. There's also a section there about contributing to a culture of ethical kind of conduct of research, of supporting early and mid-career researchers, improving equity and diversity and behaviour and culture within your group and external to it. And so, you need to have good examples of how you've gone about supporting those activities. And I think the NIH actually has a kind of a roadmap, for example, for supporting equity and diversity within research groups. Kind of need to be familiar with how those things happen and what sort of things that you can do and your group can do to support them, not just because it's going to be helpful for applications like this, but because they're really good things to do. And I'll stop there on the leadership.
Thanks, Luke. Are there any other questions for Luke? I've got some saved up, but I'll see if there's others in the room. Okay, so one thing we didn't talk about much is the project, which is, worth the 30% and things. And Well, I'll just be honest, and open and transparent. So I've applied for 5 investigator grants. I've scored 6s in the 5 grants. And I still don't have one.
Yeah.
But the things that I've scored the lowest, the 2 domains I score the lowest on are the things that rate the highest. So for example, 35% for publications, 30% for project. Just trying to work out from the project's perspective, like I look at some that have been successful and I think, well, this just isn't feasible. Like, you know, a friend of mine has got 4 RCTs with 600 people in them. And like, that just doesn't seem feasible. Whereas one of the previous comments that I got was around, well, I was leveraging like the CRE and some MRFF trials and things like that. And then I was getting comments like, well, you know, what's the return on investment in addition to what you're already going to do? But these were new projects that could just be embedded and things like that. So I just wonder how, like, if you've got any advice on cracking the balance with the project itself.
Oh, I mean,
No?
that story is heartbreaking. To come so close for so many years. I mean, I did what you. It sounds like you've done. I have like leveraged. It kind of goes back to this idea of like rich environment and things that you can leverage off. I definitely leveraged off work that has already been funded, for example, through MRFF. I think what I tried to do when I did that was not just say, you know, I will run this randomized controlled trial that's funded off MRFF as one of my projects. I would typically use it to, like, I would leverage it to generate something new rather than add it as just a piece of work that I'm going to do. I think, what did I do in terms of, I think yes, I did. Yeah, so I did state where it was funded. So where the work had been funded, I was quite explicit about where that had occurred and where it was new. I kind of said how this would be funded. I don't know if I've got anything. I don't know if I've got anything I can say that's magically, apart from when I write my project proposal, I reckon I spend like 80% of the time on the first like 1 or 2 pages. Like I almost think it's the setup of the grant as much as the studies that you do within it that is important. So I think that kind of captures the reader and you kind of demonstrate how big the problem is and how important, you know, your research is to address it. So I spend a lot of time in that setup phase. Obviously you need the randomized controlled trials and the rigor of the research to go along with it. But I think I've taken the approach that you've taken, Vanessa. So I don't have anything, I wouldn't challenge that at all. Yeah.
Yeah, I think part of it's lottery, but I've been unlucky in
Yes.
lotteries all my life. So
Can I ask a question that's sort of related to this about like themes or, you know, obviously you end up proposing, say, 2 or 3 projects or themes. How much, Luke, did you keep those streamlined to be very, you know, obviously within one program versus more disparate things that you're going to look at? Do you know what I mean?
So I had them so that they were kind of quite clearly a program. So they were very integrated, you know, they would kind of feed off each other, I guess, and all contributing to the same goal. I think I had kind of this top section, which was more kind of descriptive, I guess, like research, you know, like, and then the middle section, which was about like solution generating, like trials and that kind of stuff. And then I had a third section, which was around methods, like developing new kind of scientific methods and ways of doing things that would leverage the research that I was undertaking in the initial two streams. Yeah, that was my approach. What did you say? Something came in my head that I've lost when you started. What did you ask?
Oh, I was talking about how, like, I had themes in mind last time, for example. I think I had three themes.
Yes. So, yes. So I think one thing that I did is that I'm doing very similar work, I think, but how do I express this? If I was to write another grant in implementation science, I wouldn't get it because everyone does implementation science. There's nothing novel about that. So I had to have like a new perspective on related work. And so my new selling point was learning health systems. It's not just implementation, it's how implementation kind of evolves over time. And I think you kind of have to find that thing which is kind of cutting edge in your field, that new approach. And I think had I gone with my usual tools, I don't think I would have been successful. So that can just be about repositioning what you're currently doing and kind of extending it into like finding the crest of the wave, like that new thing that's kind of coming that everyone kind of knows about, but there's not yet a lot of research activity on. That's pretty nebulous. I don't know if that helps, but.
No, it does. Thank you. Yeah.
Like, can I ask another question around the levels? In your, like, given you said you haven't sat on panels, so you might not kind of know the answer to this, but I'd be interested in what you would do if you were me. So what level are you now?
Level 2.
You're level 2. Okay. So last year I applied for level 2 at 13 years postdoc. This year, and I did that strategically because I looked at, you know, the proportion of people funded in level 2 and the women funded in level 2 and thinking, I'm applying at level 1. Are people marking me down because they think I should be at level 2? So now I've got 8 months left at where I can be eligible to apply for level 1. And I was initially going to go into a level 2. But what would you do?
I think I would always try go in at the top of the category. So I would, if I were you, I would go level 1. I know the success rate might, look a bit worse there, but I think your competition, I think you'd be more competitive. It's hard to compete with people who have been in the scheme for 20,
Yes.
at level 2, 20 years. Yeah. So I would probably go in at level 1.
Okay, that's what I had. That's what I was thinking to do this year. Take my last opportunity before I'm at the bottom.
Yes. Yep. Go level 1.
Thank you. That's good to know. Are there any other questions? Because Dennis, you might have a question. Not related to investigator grants, but related to projects for, say, synergy applications and.
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, the synergy grant.
Yeah, the question we asked last.
Yeah, the interdisciplinary focusing on one team, those things. Yeah. Do you want me to ask questions?
Yeah.
Look, we are actually thinking of the synergy grant for the next year. So we have a few teams. So we were wondering, like, it's better to have different teams or one thing, focusing one thing. Like I can give you one example, like we have a digital aspect as one team and asthma remission as another team. And we can actually combine both digital and asthma remission in one team. So it's better to go focus on digital or focus on asthma remission, or it's like
or a mix.
Mixed one.
So
it's all coming under the big umbrella asthma, but 2 different aspects.
So sorry, if I understand the question, you've got like different pieces of work that may come together, but do you, when you're writing them up, do you have like a team of like a single discipline do the work that's related to their discipline, and a team, and so you've got different teams within discipline doing different pieces of work that then somehow come together. Is that, or do you combine them and have? Is that the question?
Yeah.
I think it's around, we're trying to work out what our major problem to solve is. And obviously we have asthma, but, what's the major problem in asthma? Is it that we want people to go into remission? Or is it that we want to target remission in those that we can? So that would be one theme, remission. And another theme would be to optimise asthma outcomes in those that we can't achieve remission for example. And another might be prevent asthma or prevent exacerbations and things like that in those that are continuing. So do we just go with, we want to solve remission, or do we want to prevent exacerbations, remit those that we can, and optimise asthma in those that we can't?
So yeah, I mean, maybe I won't answer the question directly, but I think the things that I'd be thinking about are, even if you've got 3 different aims, you need one like overall objective or mission. So you need to think about how those things come together to address that issue. And maybe the issue is asthma broadly and asthma related morbidity. And then the 3 things that you're working on everyone would have to look at that and clearly agree that they're the 3 things you would work on. They're the obvious priorities. The other thing is, with the synergy grant in particular, obviously it's about combining disciplines and expertise to solve, a kind of a complex problem. And so wherever possible, you want to be able to demonstrate how that occurs, probably within each of those 3 themes, if you decide to have 3 themes. So for this theme, we're gonna have this discipline do this, which will help this discipline do that, which will produce something novel. So that's kind of how I'd be. They're the things I'd consider about.
That makes sense. Yeah.
So it's an all-in synergy.
Yeah, and that was another question, like what is discipline? We have like a pharmacist, we have nurses, we have a health economist, a statistician, all those people working together. Is that considered interdiscipline, or we want like a respiratory researcher, cardiovascular researcher, reproductive researcher, like that? That is how the disciplines are categorized.
Sorry, I'm just not picking up that audio very well. Vanessa, would you just be able to?
Yeah. So Dennis is asking about the, I guess, the disciplines, and would it be multidisciplinary within, say, asthma? So, for example, focus on pharmacy, medicine, nursing, discovery science, molecular biology, health economics, or do we need to be interdisciplinary, so that it's kind of cardiovascular disease, respiratory, rheumatoid arthritis, biomedical engineering, so I guess it's the distinction of the inter and the multidisciplinary.
Yeah, I think, I mean, I guess I don't take what I say as truth, because I don't know whether you might have to read the guidelines, but my sense is that they're looking for more cross-disciplinary, interdisciplinary than within the same discipline.
Yeah. Okay.
Like diverse perspectives, like quite different perspectives on the same issue. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, that's helpful. Yeah. All right, well we've just gone over time, but Luke, that was immensely valuable. I think to everyone, those that are going forth in the next 8 weeks with a blank calendar so that they can just focus on this grant. And those that are, preparing themselves for a future application. From the perspective of someone going in July, that was amazing. And I really value the time that you've given up to kind of have those discussions with us. So thank you so much. Thanks from the team.
No problem. Good luck, everyone, and happy to.
Sorry, Luke, we were clapping and didn't hear you.
Oh, good. I was just going to say, thanks for the opportunity to present. Good luck. And of course, more than happy to chat more if it's helpful.
Yeah, that's really, really valuable. Thank you, Luke.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye. Yeah. Thanks for coming. And we've got a few people online. Before we begin today's Learn at Lunch, I pay my respects to traditional owners of these lands, the Awabakal people, and wherever you may be, Luke, and the other people who are online. We're really lucky